Shevan Goonetilleke. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at WSO2. I'm basically going to be talking about looking at how a growing footprint, technology footprint in your companies can lead to certain inefficiencies, and how we can use integration to overcome or mitigate some of those situations. And I'll also be looking at some of the examples from our own company, WSO2, what we've done over the last couple of years actually, to try and overcome some of those inefficiencies that we've been having through the traditional or the legacy systems that we've been using and the traditional approaches that we've been using through several business processes. If you have any questions, you're free to type it through the chat system on this webinar, and we will answer what we can at the end of this session. Okay, so to get started then, so technology, when we first initiate or implement technology in our organizations, we expect it to increase efficiency, we expect it to reduce the manual workload, to reduce costs, etc. Right? But then there are cases where, as you grow your technology footprint, as we'll see in this the next slide, over time, at the inception of your company, you will have just a couple of systems, some packaged software, some bespoke software that you'll probably develop as you go along, and eventually you will move more recently into more cloud or SaaS type systems. And over time, you'll have a plethora of systems in your organization, each doing a great job at what it's supposed to be doing, from ERP systems to business intelligence to billing or expense systems, HR management systems. But if you take a step back and look at how it all evolved, each of these would have come over time where budget would have been allocated to a sales team, and they would have gone and got their own CRM system. Finance would have got their own billing or invoicing system, another system for revenue management, accounting, travel management, etc. Right? So, well, it all doesn't happen according to a specific blueprint that you would have envisioned at the start of your company, because you have more important things to think about at the time. It's about gaining your first few customers, retaining them, earning your first $1,000, $10,000, and growing your business basically. And how your technology evolves is not top of the priority. I mean, on hindsight, we probably think it should be, but at the time, I'm sure there would be more priority things that you want to think about. But what eventually happens is, as your technology footprint grows, you hit a situation where you will have all the systems in place, all doing a wonderful job again in their respective areas, in their silos. But when it actually comes to working across these systems, there are still going to be some manual intervention required, because, for example, if you take what you see on the slide now, your CRM system will have all your customer information. Your billing system you'll need to raise your invoicing on that. But if the two systems don't talk to each other, you're going to have to manually go into the billing system, key in the customer information all over again, and effectively duplicating the customer information and send out that invoice. So effectively what happens is, then once you have multiple systems in organizations, you're going to have quite a bit of manual workload to try and work across these systems in order to have an efficient business process running. And obviously, when you have multiple manual workarounds to get these systems talking to each other, as soon as there's a manual effort required, that could always lead to human error. Which means then there'll be rework in place. People will start getting frustrated. There'll be complaints around. There'll be blames around, and people will start feeling that they could be, actually adding much more value than using these systems and going through all the manual workarounds, despite having all these expensive systems. So, what do you do then once you have this situation. Obviously, you need to try and calm the storm, mitigate the situation, and provide some solution. So if you look at what the options you have, so obviously, first option would be to invest in a very comprehensive suite of tools that you can buy off the shelf, probably a cloud-enabled system. It's going to cost you millions of dollars, though, if you want a fully fledged system, ERP type system. There are loads of those available out there. It's going to come with an implementation cost. It's going to come with license costs. It's going to come with maintenance costs. At the end of the day, you'll also have to probably customize it, because no system is just going to work directly out of the box, because there'll be something unique in the way you do your business, in your business process, that is not going to work with any off-the-shelf system. Right? So you either need to change your business process, or you need to change the way the system works. So that again is going to be a cost, and leaving this option becoming rather expensive to implement. Option 2 is to go out and build your own bespoke solution, forget about everything that you have now, and create a system that is tailor-made to your organization, that will just work perfectly end-to-end, and get the job done. Then again, it's going to need quite a bit of effort to map it out, how things should work, on to implement that, to design it, and of course, then they need to start thinking about maintenance and support for such a system. Can you do it in-house? Do you need to get some external support for that? Do you need to hire new people to do this? And it's going to take time to build as well. If you're looking at a system that's going to work across your organization, work across business processes, it's going to take time to build and implement those systems. So the third option is to look at what you already have and not get rid of any of those systems. Keep your legacy systems and try and see how you can get them talking to each other. Basically integrate those systems together. Right? They might be disparate systems, some of them on-premise, standalone systems, some of them on the cloud. But how can you get these systems working with each other so that you can run your business processes using your existing technology stack? So going a bit deeper into that, so it's basically talking about creating a connected business through integrating what you have, and effectively creating this integration layer that's effectively a glue between the systems. It will help you run your business processes across the different disparate systems in your organization, and which will in turn help you orchestrate data across systems. And which in turn will enable automation as well, automation of those business processes, and improve efficiency and optimize most of the processes that you do. And being able to integrate across systems also means that you can then correlate that information or the data that you have in those systems, and which will then result in more powerful analysis that you can do, and which can generate more powerful insights that you were not able to do before, because it would have been very time consuming, it would have been too much of data to deal with. But as soon as you integrate all of this, then you have a data set that you can automate and correlate that automation so that you can come up with more powerful and insightful dashboards. You can also start thinking about creating digital assets with those correlated data now. Probably expose them as APIs internally or externally, and basically look at ways of monetizing those and gaining competitive advantage over those. So now I'd like to go through a few examples at WSO2 itself, how we've gone through the whole process of optimizing based on the technology that we have. So although we are the technology company, we run as a general business. We have employee records to manage, we have bills to pay, we have invoices to raise, we have sales records to manage, customer records to manage, etc. Right? So if you look at the technology footprint at WSO2, I've just listed some of the systems that we've put in place over time. We have Google Labs to manage our internal productivity, Salesforce for CRM, Allocation and Jira for support requests and ticketing, Concur for expense management, People HR for managing our people records, NetSuite for finance, and we also have a bunch of internal applications that we built over time to help us in our own productivity that are kind of custom made to us. And then there are many more. And so looking at this, then there are over time, I mean, there have been business processes that we've had to have some manual intervention because we were not, these systems were not able to talk to each other. So then I think sometime last year, we then took a step back and said, hey, we are an integration company. Why should we have to deal with all this manual effort? And why can't we basically eat our own dog food and try and integrate some of these scenarios, some of these technologies, and automate these scenarios and improve the whole, or basically optimize the whole business process around that. And we've been successful, and we've been eating our own dog food to achieve this. So I'll run through a couple of examples on what we've done. It's an ongoing process, it's a journey really, and as and when we start doing this, we think of more scenarios we want to try and automate and optimize. So it's going, as it's kind of become a never-ending journey now, but it has become very interesting and fruitful in the process. So the first example I want to talk about is around passwords. So as you know, as and when we start getting all the systems in place, especially disparate systems from different vendors, systems that are not related in any way to each other, they will all have their own username and password requirements. So users will need to remember, if you have 15 systems, most probably remember 15 passwords and 15 usernames, because they will all require different formats for the username, different formats for the password. Some will want numerical characters, some will want just special characters, etc. So remembering all 15 passwords and usernames is going to be a real hassle to people, and you'll just end up with people having to write these down on a notepad, put it inside their drawer. Then it becomes a security issue, or they just put it on their phone somewhere, or they just forget about the passwords, which means then there are so many support requests around that, and you need to have a support desk. Your internal IT team will need to start supporting this through a support desk, especially as your organization starts growing. So it was a similar situation for us until last year. We had all these applications that were on board. I myself used to have a separate notepad document with all the usernames and passwords that we had to use to access all the systems. But at the same time, we, as an integration company, we had a product called Identity Server. A key feature that Identity Server, WSO2 Identity Server, offers is single sign-on. It's basically log in once and get logged into all systems. Right? So we implemented this last year. So effectively, what we do is now we log in just once into our cloud entity. So we've also recently moved our Identity Server into the cloud, and internal applications became the first production customer for WSO2 Identity Cloud. And with that, we are now able to log into the Identity Cloud, and through that, then get access to all the other applications without having to re-enter usernames, passwords to any of the other applications. So single sign-on is what we've implemented now, but we have a roadmap here that we want to do in terms of, first thing is provisioning new users, as in when a new user comes in, without having to go and create usernames and passwords for each of these applications. We want to say, okay, this user is from the engineering team, he should have access to this set of 9 or 10 applications, and just go set him up so that he will automatically get provisioned for all 9 or 10 of those applications without him having to go through a user registration process through those applications. And similarly, when that user leaves the company, then we need to make sure that he doesn't have access to any of these applications anymore. So we will have to go through a deprovisioning process, which again is possible through WSO2 Identity Server, and it's part of our roadmap for implementation within WSO2 now. So we also have a set of internal facing systems which our employees use on a day-to-day basis. And we also have a set of public facing systems. Again, like for example, at least in Jira, that is where you as a customer would come and enter any support request that you have. So you should have access to the support system, but you would not have access as a customer to our internal Google Apps, for instance, or Salesforce. But an employee within should be able to access Salesforce, Google Apps, all the internal apps, plus also be able to access the Jira system that is public facing, so that he can attend to and resolve any support tickets. So here again, it's ongoing effort. We haven't got to this yet, but our plan is to have a separate identity server instance for our public-facing systems and use the federation feature in WSO2 identity server to federate identity across the two sites effectively, so that the WSO2 ID or the internal person should be able to then just log in once into the WSO2 cloud effectively, and also be logged into the external systems that he needs access to. So, for example, for myself, all I now need is username and password. My username as shevan@wso2.com and a password associated with that. And as you see in this next screen, I just go and log in to the WSO2 Identity Cloud, and with that, I get access to what we call Application Manager or App Manager, where we have links into all our internal applications. And I'm pre-logged into all of those systems, and I don't need to go and log into any of them again until I log out or my password expires at some point. So that has been an incredible efficiency tool for us. So as I said, it's a roadmap. There are certain other things we want to do so that we use, get the full power of identity server. We actually renamed the whole identity offering to Identity and Access Management recently. So if you go into our website, that's what it's called now. Okay, so moving to the next example. So this is to do with consultant allocation. So when I say consultant allocation, this is really related to the services that we offer as a customer. To you as a customer, if you require us to come and do some consultancy with you, we will need to allocate one of our engineers into that particular custom opportunity, and then there's travel, etc., that needs to get processed, and then we need to maintain those records for future. So what we used to do until a few months ago actually was a rather tedious process where account manager will go and enter, basically effectively book that opportunity in Salesforce, saying we won this opportunity with this customer for X $1,000. He wants us to come on site and do a 3-month consultancy with them. So, and that will get logged in Salesforce, and then the account manager is to come onto a Google form and re-enter basically all that information, saying this particular customer needs development service carried out in New York from 1st of April till 30th of June, and put other details like the engagement scope, etc., and send that off to allocations team. So the allocations team will then get an email, and someone in the allocations team will then extract that information from the email again manually, and go and enter that into an allocation spreadsheet, which is another Google Doc. It's all on the cloud, but it's just a spreadsheet again. So that effectively then duplicates that record again to say engineers required in New York from 1st of April till 30th of June, and these are the details, etc. And then those details will also include something that we call the engagement code, which then helps us identify what this engagement was for, which we use for booking any costs and revenue gains for profitability analysis later on. So the allocations team will then send out a bunch of emails to potential candidates for this engagement, and then they will reply saying, one of them will reply saying, yes, I can go for this, and then that request then gets emailed out to travel team, and then the travel team will then extract that information and put it into yet another spreadsheet, again duplicating that same records. Then we'll go ahead and arrange the travel, get the flight details in place, get hotels booked, and then send the email to the traveler or the consultant saying, okay, your travel has been booked, these are your flight details, etc. And that's the process. But by the end of this process, we've often encountered issues where we've had errors in dates, we've had errors in locations, and most importantly, we've had errors or sometimes the engagement code that I mentioned earlier, which we used to track the financials around it, was either missing or invalid, which caused a huge problem when it came to tracking those costs and looking at the overall profitability or of that particular engagement, and then affecting overall gross margin calculations, etc. So again, this was quite a tedious business process, which we took a step back and looked at closely, and we thought about how we can use our own technology to try and overcome this. So effectively, what we did, again, it's an ongoing effort, but we've made quite a bit of progress on this. We've looked at the data that we have. So all the data that we need, we have in a couple of systems that we maintain, that we have in place. It's mainly Salesforce. We'll include the record of the customer, who the customer is, the record of the particular opportunity, this particular details about the consulting engagement, the scope, the dates of the engagement, everything is there, including the engagement code for financial tracking. All of that data is already there. And we have our people records in people HR. So we know which team a particular person is from. We have his employment history, etc. in people HR. So all the process, or the manual process that we went through earlier was basically mapping a suitable person to a suitable opportunity or suitable engagement, so that that person can go and fulfill that engagement. So what we effectively did then was took that data from Salesforce and from people HR into our enterprise service bus or ESB through ESB connectors. So we have a bunch of, we have actually more than 150 connectors now working for various systems, on-premise and cloud systems. So we have a connector for Salesforce, we have a connector for people HR, and we use these two connectors to gather that data from Salesforce and people HR on a schedule basis. I think it happens several times a day now, through enterprise service bus, through a data services server into a data store. And then through that data store, we pick that information again, and we built an application layer on top of a WSO2 application server. All that application layer does is then does the mapping between a person, engineer, and the opportunity. And then that mapping, and then through that, we've also built the facility to start doing notifications and do some basic reports. That end of the day was basically doing what this whole manual process was doing. So effectively now what happens is all that information that the account managers enters into Salesforce gets orchestrated automatically through the systems into this what we call the allocation tracker application, which also then sends that information or orchestrates that information right through to another application layer that we have called WSO2 Travel, which again is a internally built system. And those systems then will do the all the notification, the workflow management, and basically finalizing those records, and a report will get generated at the end of it saying, this particular, these are the opportunities that we had, or the engagement requests that we had, these are the people that went on that, these are the engagement codes that that relate to that, and this is the number of effort or the number of days each person spent on that particular engagement. So effectively, that was that full business process that now is seamlessly flowing through without any data errors, and most importantly, we are now able to have an accurate set of engagement codes, which we can then go ahead and book all the costs and the revenue that we get for this particular engagement. I'll move into another example related to this again. Oh, sorry. So this what you see on screen is basically the application layer. This is where the mapping happens between the engagement records and the people records, and invokes the very basic workflow and the notifications. And then the last screenshot you see is the report that gets generated saying this particular person from this particular team got allocated or spent this many days on this particular engagement code, and then that's what we use for financial calculations, etc. But it was all made possible because we were able to integrate that data now from Salesforce right through from people HR and do that mapping through correlating the information that we need. So I'll move on to another example. It's again somewhat related to what I said earlier, but this is to do with the whole profitability or the gross margin analysis for everything that we deliver. And when we say this is basically looking at the cost of delivery, basically the cost of our support operations plus the cost of our consulting operations, and then mapping that to the revenue that we gain over those operations in order to come up with our overall gross margin. So here again, until a few months ago, the process that we used to follow was we used to have this allocation sheet that I mentioned earlier, which used to list out all the allocations, all the engagement requests that came through, plus who then gets allocated to that particular engagement. It will have things like what the engagement is, what is it, a offsite engagement, is it on-site, which means someone had to travel, how many days was it for, what is the engagement code, and who's the person involved in that particular engagement, etc. So that was a bunch of details that we had in that consultant allocation sheet. Similarly, we had another spreadsheet that used to maintain the support rotations, basically saying who was involved in providing support to customers for this particular week, for how many days of that week, from which team was that person from, etc. So that again is required in order to do a cost calculation in terms of how the support process was. Then we maintained the travel spreadsheet, which used to tell us the cost of accommodation, cost of travel, flight travel, any per diem that we paid, any incidental expenses that were incurred in a particular travel request, and then map that to the person who traveled, map that to the engagement code. And then we had another spreadsheet which used to have all the payroll data for each person in the organization, because if you are calculating the total cost of a particular engagement, we need to then factor in the payroll for that person as well. And then revenue for a particular engagement was in NetSuite. So we have a person in our finance team who used to spend 3 to 4 weeks a month, or basically at the end of the quarter, to go through all these spreadsheets, get all that data, create another spreadsheet of his own to do all this data mapping, cleanup, etc., and then use that to come up with a profitable analysis to say, okay, 3 or 4 weeks later after the quarter, we were able to say, okay, yes, this was a gross margin, this is the total revenue, and this was the total cost that we incurred in delivering that revenue, and to say what our margin was. So again, 3 to 4 weeks is a long time. Again, given that all this data was already in systems that we had. So we took a step back again to see what can we do now to try and improve the situation here, try and bring down that time that we're spending on this and reduce any errors, because again, as soon as manual effort is required, it's going to start resulting in errors and potentially rework, and then it could even or understate our financials, which was quite could have been quite a serious issue. So we decided to scrap this process as well, and we then looked at what we had. So most of the data that we required here was already captured in the example that I mentioned earlier through the whole allocations and the travel process. It was already going into a data store, but we needed to build that logic then to do the calculations in terms of basically mapping out who did what when from consulting and support, map that to the travel records, map that to that particular person's payroll, and then we used this engagement code concept that we have across all these data elements to then map that to the revenue record as well, that is in NetSuite. And then payroll information is already in people HR, although we used to maintain another spreadsheet for that as well. So using that information, then using USB connectors again, we were able to get that, extract that information. And so what we do at the moment, we are still in the process of implementing the whole NetSuite integration there. But at the moment, we now get a report that will tell us, give us a full breakdown of all the allocations and basically all the delivery related cost and the spend, and in details in terms of days, etc., which we can then easily, with a bit of manual processing still, we need to do that still, but then upload that into NetSuite. And through NetSuite, then we have all classified set of travel records, payroll records, saying which map out to the engagement codes. And through that, we can then go into the ascertaining engagement level margin and then roll that up into our overall gross margin. So as I said, the automation around the whole NetSuite part is still in progress, but it's certainly doable given the technology that we have. Okay, so moving on. So again, a very powerful feature of having this data now, being able to pull all this data out of all these systems, is being able to create dashboards, very insightful dashboards that we can use to correlate data and information across systems. And I know and we actually ourselves evaluated quite a few products out there which were rather expensive to implement, basically big data solutions with colorful dashboards and etc., which we can use for insight generation. But then again, we took a step back and said, okay, we have the technology to do this, and why not try eating our own dog food again? So these are the systems that we've implemented so far in terms of capturing that data. There are several other systems in the pipeline that we want to bring into this picture. Basically, extract that information through USB connector related to that, and through Enterprise Service Bus, through the data services server, bring that into an internal data store. And then through that internal data store, we start using that data, correlate that data, and build dashboards with that correlated information that we couldn't do with the standalone systems earlier. For example, if you want to look at revenue generated from a particular customer against what we actually booked for the particular customer, is basically the contract value. The contract value is in Salesforce at the moment, but the revenue is in NetSuite. So if we wanted to do that earlier, we would have had to go into two different systems, generate two Excel sheets from that, and do some manual mapping to get that done. But now we are able to have a dashboard that will do that mapping for us, and basically show us, okay, this is how much we booked, and this is the revenue gain from that particular booking. So again, it's an ongoing effort. We've come up with several dashboards so far to do with our build process. There are several operational dashboards. There are some finance dashboards, travel-related dashboards, customer-related dashboards, etc. It's an ongoing effort. So I just put some screenshots here. Some of these are just mock data because there's some sensitive information, especially on financials. We just come up with a mock dashboard there, just for demo purposes. But the other useful thing is, through this approach, what we gained is, for example, people HR. We manage all our people records in people HR, but it didn't give us the dashboarding capability that we actually wanted. So now with our big data approach, or the approach that we are using to collect this data, we are pumping all that data on a nightly basis, which means then we can trend it if you want on a monthly, on a weekly, on a quarterly basis now, and come up with any dashboards that we want to look at what our employment trends are, what are the resignation trends, what is the ratio between basically gender ratio, etc., which was very powerful information that needed a lot of work if you wanted that information earlier. So as I said, there's a lot more activity happening. There's a lot more integrations that we want to do. It's ongoing effort, and as and when we do stuff, it's an iterative approach. As and when we do stuff, we think of other things we want to do and other automations that we want to do and other areas that we want to optimize. So some best practices that we've learned in the process, which I would like to share with you, is basically if you want to go through this integration journey and look at optimizing your internal business processes, the first place to start, in my opinion, is to identify your integration champion within within your organization. And this person can be could be an operations person, it could be a head of operations, it could be a CIO, or it could just be someone who has been around for a long time and has worked in so many areas of the company and just knows how everything works. Right? It's good enough to know it at a high level, because there will always be someone who you can go to if you want to dive down, but someone needs to have that overall picture in order to look at across business processes and start automating and improving efficiency. And then the next step is to start looking at areas that you think need some efficiency improvements where technology is concerned. Look at the end-to-end business process. Look at the areas that need to get addressed first. And then, based on that, come up with a list of priorities that you want to do. And as I said, it's an iterative process. So that list of priorities will help you, do or basically achieve some quick wins and then move on from there. So once you know what you want to automate and what systems are in concern, then you need to go and select the technology that you want and select the implementation approach to get that technology implemented and achieve the benefits that you want. And once you've done that, you just need to go for it and still keep iterating until you're successful. So I want to elaborate a bit more on the whole technology selection approach. Because when you're selecting an integration technology, some of the considerations that you need to go through is look at the technologies that you have in place now, the legacy systems. Some of them may be on-premise, some of them on the cloud. Will the integration technology of your choice, will it be compatible with all these technologies that you want to, that you already have? Will this technology, integration technology, enable you to talk, enable these technologies talking to each other? Will it support the protocols? Some of them may be really outdated legacy systems. Some of them may be on the cloud. Some of them may be using, may require some kind of mediation or transformation, etc. Is it all supported by the integration technology that you're looking at? How easy is it to implement? Can you yourself go ahead and do it? Is it easy to learn? Do you have the bandwidth, the effort, the skills within your organization to go and do it? Or can you easily find system integrators or partners who can help you to go ahead with this integration? Or is it something that's difficult, or it's going to be, not well documented, which means it's going to get, it's just going to be harder. You need to think about support and maintenance. Does the vendors behind this technology provide adequate support? You might decide to automate and optimize some of your mission critical flows, which means any issue that happens within that automation obviously becomes a priority one issue, and you're going to need immediate support, which means your vendor needs to then back you up with SLAs, service level agreements, so that you can go back to them as soon as something happens. And then most importantly, you need to think about your TCO, your total cost of ownership as well. Right? What are the components contributing to your overall TCO? Are there customization or implementation costs involved? Are there licensing costs? Are there overall initial setup or purchasing costs involved? What about maintenance, etc.? All of these will add up to your overall total cost of ownership. Then you need to start comparing that across vendors. So WSO2 can help you when it comes to selecting your technology. Encourage you to go and visit WSO2.com. We focus on 5 main different areas, mainly integration again, which we provide you a platform for integration along the lines that I went through earlier. We focus on API management, where you can have your own digital assets and start exposing some of these assets as APIs for competitive advantage or improving our business process. We have an area dedicated to security, so identity access and access management. Analytics is another key focus area for us. Looking at more intelligent and business insights type of analysis. Internet of Things is something we are really interested in. There's a lot of activity happening around there. There's loads of more information if you visit our website. So basically, all the products that we offer are 100% open source, which basically you can go ahead, download the products, and even start using them now. And if you have expertise in-house, you can just go ahead and implement some of these automations, some of the simple automations that we discussed earlier. Do it yourself. There won't be any cost involved. Because it's open source, unless you want to go for support or some kind of consultancy, you can just go ahead and implement it yourself, which basically drastically brings down your total cost of ownership around that. And the integration technologies that we have in place support a wide variety of legacy systems, SaaS applications, services, and APIs. As I said, we have a growing list of connectors as well, 150 and counting at the moment. We are continuously improving the connectors so that they will work with the new versions of these applications, and keep on adding methods to these connectors so that we support new use cases and scenarios. And if there's something that's missing, you can always contact us, and we'll be happy to look at how we can help you with implementing that. We also have a comprehensive framework, connector framework, and documentation around that, which means you yourself can go and extend some of these connectors. All our products are well documented, as I said earlier, and we most importantly have a very comprehensive support model as well, ranging through evaluation support, which will help you understand if this technology is what is best for you, and then helping you through your development phase, through a development support effort, and then supporting you while in production through your mission critical applications, and making sure you have support with SLAs around it. And then if you need support to implement it, there we also offer consulting services as well. So get in touch with us. You can always come to wso2.com/contact and get in touch with us if you have a question. Have a look at our website again. Our product information is all there, and or get in touch with us. We will get back to you very quickly if you have any query about any of our products. I've also given you my contact details here. It's my email, shevan@wso2.com, and my Twitter handle. If you happen to be in London this November, we are having WSO2Con Europe, which our theme is going to be Agile Digital Transformation through open source. We'll be having several customers who will come and share their experiences with everyone in terms of using WSO2 products. We will have some great keynote speeches there, and also we will have you will be able to hear directly from the people behind the success of our products, who are involved day to day in building these products, and provide expertise and their opinions in terms of helping you implement these products. So that's it from me for today. Hope I was able to be helpful, and hope you learned something. Thank you. As I said, if you have any questions, just type it in, and we'll be happy to answer that. Okay, so we have a question here. So the question is, how long did it take to implement the allocations workflow that I discussed earlier? So as I said, it's an iterative approach. We are not done yet, and I would think it's going to take a while. With all the ideas and the requirements that are coming in, it's going to take a while. But to get that initial flow implemented, once we had an idea in terms of what we wanted to do, it took us about 3 months, with about 2 people working on it full time. But this is again, it's in-house effort. Again, we were dog fooding our services as well. So it was not only the products. We did an internal allocation request to allocate someone from our engineering team who can help us with the whole implementation, so that we go through the whole development service approach or the consulting approach internally as well. And then once we are in production now, we are also dog fooding a whole support approach. where if we encounter issue with any of our internal applications, we basically raise a support ticket through our general channels, the usual support channel, just like you as a customer would do. All right, so that's all we have now. So we'll close the webinar and hope you learned something out of this. Thank you.